The United States has always been a country of immigrants. But what has drawn people to move here? And what has shaped U.S. immigration policy? Fear and need have shaped both why people leave their homes and why Americans want or don't want them here. This has resulted in a complicated series of immigration policies passed over the last 200 years. The United States allows legal entry to 1 million immigrants a year. Half are granted entry under family reunification to be with close relatives who are legal immigrants or U.S. citizens. Special skills visas are granted to 140,000 people. 70,000 visas are granted to refugees, and 50,000 visas are awarded via lottery. When Europeans immigrated to North America in the 1600s, they simply came and took over the land already populated by more than 500 different indigenous nations.
This is my family tree.
My name is Roxy Johnson. My mother's first family here was about 1535. My mother's family came from England. In those days, there was so much religious persecution that the folks didn't get to practice their personal religion, so they decided to leave and go somewhere else. They were Puritans. The only way to get here was by ship. Robert Chapman paid his own way, so he wasn't indentured to anyone. They landed in Boston. Robert Chapman was asked to go to Saybrook, Connecticut to help settle a town in Saybrook, Connecticut. They got farms established and a town established and a fort established and got rid of most of the Pequot Indians.
From 1492 through the 1700s, Spain, Portugal, Holland, France, and England were the main Europeans to immigrate to the Americas, and 450,000 Africans were enslaved and forced here. In 1848, the gold rush drew people from around the world to California. Chinese began immigrating in large numbers, pulled by the jobs in the gold fields and the United States' need for labor to build the Transcontinental Railroad. In the late 1800s, using manifest destiny as moral justification, immigrants were encouraged to settle in the western United States. With jobs becoming scarcer, European Americans began competing for jobs held by Chinese. In reaction, racism grew and pressure mounted against the Chinese immigrants. In 1882, the Chinese Exclusionary Act prohibited immigration of Chinese workers.
My name is Frances Wong Tam. My family is from Taishan in Guangdong Province, China. They came and immigrated to the United States around the turn of the century, 1900s. My grandfather Wong came by himself. During that period, the Chinese Exclusion Act was still in effect. His friends here in Tucson encouraged him to buy a passage on a ship that came from Hong Kong to Mexico. From Mexico, he was able to walk across the border and come into Tucson. After he was able to become a merchant in Tucson, it was the Yansing market, and so around 1911, he notified the department saying that he wished to go back to China because he wished to get married and start a family. So with these papers in hand, he was able to go back to his village in Taishan, China, marry my grandmother, had 2 boys, and when he came back in 1918, he declared a wife and 2 sons, re-entering the United States through San Francisco. And so in 1919, they arrived in January, stayed there, and then was able to leave Angel Island in June.
In 1921, the first quota to be enforced on all nationalities was established. The intention was to turn back the clock and return to an earlier demographic makeup, which was predominantly Western European. Mexicans, who were wanted for agricultural labor, and Western Europeans were exempted from the quota.
I'm Hector Gonzalez, and Juan Gonzalez came to the United States for the first time probably around 1920. There were people that brought in immigrant labor from Mexico to the Northwest, Idaho, Montana, to pick sugar beet. You're in remote locations in agricultural areas, and eventually you go back, and then back to the United States again. So that happened several times. So this time, he goes up to the border near Texas, Laredo, Texas, and they have recruiters who are looking for labor, but this time is for people to work in the steel mills. But eventually, what happens? You have a depression, whew, don't need the labor anymore, off you go. All the Mexicans go back. Then the Second World War came, and once again, the United States was in need of labor. We had to support the war machine, and that required railroads. So they brought in railroad workers from Mexico. And my father went up in that Bracero program that was from 1943 to 1945, and this time he ended up in Milwaukee and repaired locomotives. As the Bracero program ended, he went back to Mexico. Somewhere along the line, and I don't know exactly, my dad became a legal resident of the United States. I've lost track of how many times he's gone back up. This time he works in a factory. He works in the skilled trades in Detroit at the Rouge plant. And he made enough money that he thought it was time for him to establish a family. So he goes back to the small town of Totonilco, Jalisco. But you can't bring her back because you don't have your papers. So he goes back to the United States, comes back down and visits. Finally, the papers came, and we were ready to move to the United States, so it's 1953. I have a brother. Now I had 4 sisters. 2 of my little sisters, the second generation, were born in Detroit. They're American citizens.
In the late 1800s and early 1900s, European laws restricting religious practices, explosive politics, and deteriorating economic conditions led to a rise in immigration, particularly from Germany, Ireland, and Italy. World War II caused Jews and others to seek safety in the United States, but many were refused entry. Quota number restrictions, fear, and racism sealed the fate of these people. Over the next 70 years, the United States would experience the largest flow of immigration in her history. The Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965 eliminated nation of origin quotas and banned discrimination based on race, sex, nationality, place of birth, or residence, changing the face of the United States. The mid-1970s and 80s brought immigrants and refugees fleeing from wars in Asia and Central America and famine in Africa. But times had changed. Those who came without legal immigration papers or recognized refugee status were now considered illegal and treated as criminals.
My name is Sebastian Kinak. I'm from Guatemala, Chimaltenango, one of the province where the Maya and Cachiquel are the majorities. I left because of the violence that happened. I received 3 death-threatened letters from the people who killed hundreds of thousands of people in the Mayan community. In the whole highland in Guatemala, more than 200,000 Mayan people were killed by the soldiers, the government, plus disappeared. The person who helped me, he find a person, a guide or the coyote who bring people from other countries. So I met one of them in Mexico. I used fake paper, like Mexican passport, up to Tijuana. And then Tijuana, I met several kids who were working like coyotes or guides. So I went through the fence. I tried to apply for political asylum. They never called me for an interview. And finally, I stayed here for almost 8 years without paper, and then met now as my wife. So we married, and now I'm a U.S. citizen.
Around the beginning of the 21st century, unrest in countries around the world and drought, famine, and violence in Ethiopia and other North African countries caused many to flee, seeking safety.
My name is Tilahun Liban. I left Ethiopia in November 2000 because of some of the political organization. They are forcing me to play for their organization, to play music. They put me in the prison. Then after 3 months in the prison, I agreed to play. Then after that, I came out because I want to have plan to leave. That's why I agreed. Then after that, I left the town, the country. I left. I used illegally. I crossed the border illegally to Kenya. I was captured by the Kenyan police, and I requested the asylum. Then UNHCR, they give me mandated as a refugee. I was there in the refugee camp. Well, I was there for 10 years. They are give as a resettlement for the refugees. That opportunities I get with other refugees. That's why I came here, US. After I reached even in US, I didn't believe that I am here. Requested, the government to unifying me with my family. Then thanks for the American government, they brought my family. It's hard, I was 12 years with alone in the refugee camp, 10 years, here 2 years. Then after that, I get my family. There is nothing, be happy without the family,
With the terrorist acts of September 11, 2001, Americans became even more anti-immigrant. Securing America's borders became the rallying cry for anti-immigrant talk and opened the way for more state-level laws restricting and punishing immigration.
In the Syrian seeking refuge today, we should see the Jewish refugee of World War II. 1 generation passes, 2 generations passes, and suddenly we don't remember where we came from. And we suggest that somehow there is us and there is them, not remembering we used to be them.
Today, immigrants from all over the world are pulled here for the same reasons as those who first colonized this country, to better their lives. Some come for economic reasons. Others are fleeing persecution or war and seek a safe place to live. Regardless of from where, how, or why they come, immigrants today, like those of the past, contribute to the continuous creation of this country.